Ecclesiasticus 10 and 1. A wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of the prudent man is well ordered. As the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers, and what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein. An unwise king destroyeth his people, but through prudence of them which are in authority, the city shall be inhabited. Call halal Yahweh Bashanah Rashai Bahasham Rakar Kodash. Double honors unto the apostles, double honors unto the elder bishops, salutations to all my fellow laborers doing this work in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so, now more so than ever, to the scattered elect that are scattered around the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners, among the heathen that look like the heathen, and to the Akwath that are listening and learning to you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Malcolm from the branch of the Great Millstone here in Chicago, coming at you another lesson in truth. And I'm not going to, got to be very careful about what I say because, when they put information out, other people are allowed to talk about it, but we aren't. All right. With certain things where injuries were exposed with different medical practices and videos that talk about it, but we talk about it. I talk about it. The brothers talk about it, and we get strikes on our videos, or our videos get removed. And the information that we are quoting or talking about, that we use is still on the YouTube. Go figure. But we're going to focus in on the middle video, Building 7, revealed the truth about 9/11 and what happened with Clayton Morris. All right. And this is one of those things where the facts don't add up. They never did. And, a lot of lies were told, but now the truth is being revealed. And, Esau Edom is being made bare. Matter of fact, let's get that and then start this video. Salakia. Jeremiah 49:10, I believe. Yeah. It's Jeremiah 49:10, and it reads, "But I have made Esau bare, I have uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren, and his neighbors, and he is not." So I'm going to actually do something that I rarely do. I'm going to actually, this video is a 38-minute long video, which I highly suggest you watch. I'm probably going to play about the first 15 and a half minutes uninterrupted, and then bring in a couple scriptures and close out. So without any further ado, Mr. Clayton Morris, Building 7 revealed.
When you think of 9/11 2001, you'll likely think about the Twin Towers collapsing in Midtown Manhattan. But what you might not know is that another building in New York City collapsed that day. That building was called 7 World Trade Center. Many just call it Building 7. It also came crashing down that day. But why? What really happened? Why aren't we allowed to hear about this? Why is this seemingly being kept from us? One man is aiming to change all of that, a man who was there that day in Manhattan, Ted Walter. He's the executive director of the International Center for 9/11 Studies, who has dedicated his life to helping get answers for the families of the events of 9/11. And he joins us now on Redacted. Ted, thanks for joining us. I have a lot of questions about Building 7. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Clayton. It's an honor to be with you. And I applaud you for taking a good look at this issue.
Well, I think, it's interesting. We have so many of our viewers are always bringing this up, this question. And I've wanted to do a dedicated show on this question for a long time, and I've promised my audience about it. It's something I'm deeply fascinated by on a whole host of levels. We'll get into all of the nitty-gritty details on this. But first, I just want to understand from you, why did you decide to dig for answers overall for the families of the 9/11 victims? Why did you want to dedicate a portion of your life to this?
Yeah, so I moved to New York City 2 weeks before 9/11. I was just starting college there at NYU. And the day of 9/11 was actually my first real day of classes. And I think it was, 15 minutes into my first class when the North Tower was struck. And so 9/11 was really a part of my introduction to the city and really colored my experience there, living all the years that I lived there in my most formative years. And so I always had sort of lingering doubts. And then in 2006, I started digging into it more. And there was a lot of information coming out at that time. And in the space of a few weeks of studying it deeply, I came to the conclusion that Building 7, as well as the Twin Towers, had been brought down by controlled demolition, and that the story that we've been given about 9/11 was totally false. And a lot of people react in different ways when they come to that conclusion. And for me, I was I couldn't help it. I couldn't tolerate that this huge lie, this huge deception was had been perpetrated and was sort of dictating so much of our the way that our society is organized, our policies, our just culturally it had a profound impact, obviously. And so I just I ever since then I've had this burning desire to try to correct the record on what happened that day, to try to help steer the direction of our country or in a different direction, in a more positive direction, get us away from the policies, the permanent war that's been perpetuated since. And over the years, I've grown very close to many 9/11 family members who have been involved in the same struggle. And to this day, almost 22 years later, are still trying to expose the full truth about what happened to their loved ones, and to get justice and to get answers, and to try to ensure that something like this never happens again. So it's just a deep, sort of profound spiritual drive to correct the record on this and live in a society that is not governed by such a profound deception and lie.
Well, thank you for that. That's why you're here. That's what our show is dedicated to. So you have an open forum this afternoon for us to be able to talk about this. So in 2006, you mentioned a lot of information was starting to come out. You started to see things that were challenging your belief system. Was there one particular piece of evidence that was shared with you or you discovered that changed everything for you? Were you in the belief system that jets hit or large aircraft hit the World Trade Center? That's what brought it down, and that's what we've all been led to believe. And we didn't know about Building 7 really at all. So what describe for me what you started to uncover in 2006?
Yeah, it was looking at both at the Twin Towers and Building 7. I think in the case of Building 7, if you just look at it, your first suspicion has to be that it was a controlled demolition. The way that it comes down symmetrically, straight into its footprint, and you learn that steel frame buildings have never collapsed due to fire. So why did 3 come down in one day? And you look at Building 7 and you say, well, unless there's overwhelming evidence to the contrary, this was a controlled demolition. And there isn't overwhelming evidence to the contrary. All of the evidence points in the direction of it being a demolition. Some of the most rock solid evidence relating to Building 7 and the Twin Towers is the evidence of extremely high temperatures during the destruction of these buildings. In the dust, there are previously molten particles of iron and other materials that reached several thousand degrees in temperature. There's no reason that those materials would be in the dust. Those kind of particles would be in the dust unless there was a very extremely hot event that happened in the destruction of the buildings. You actually had molten metal pouring out of the South Tower before it came down, and this the official explanation is that this was aluminum from the aircraft that had melted and was pouring out of the building. But aluminum at the temperature it would have reached would not be this bright yellow orange molten metal. It would be silverish, and so it's right there in front of you. And I think the thing that most affected me at that time was really understanding that the tops of the towers came down, almost at free fall, and yet which implies no resistance whatsoever from the structure below, and yet all of the materials in the building, in both buildings, were completely pulverized. The steel structure was completely shattered, and so which implies a huge collision of materials. If you're going to have that much destruction, the top really has to slow down and be crushing what's below it, and it doesn't slow down. As if you measure it, it constantly accelerates. So the idea, the only thing that could reconcile the fact that it came down so quickly at almost free fall, and yet there's this huge destruction of materials, pulverization of all the concrete, is that it was explosives doing the job. I think that was the concept that hit me the most at that time. But really, you just have to go and look at Building 7, and I think, if it, I don't want to insult anybody, but I think it's crazy to think that building came down due to scattered office fires. It's delusional, and I know that's hard for some people to come to that realization. But I encourage people to go there and to go outside of their comfort zone and open their minds to the truth.
I think our audience does that. So I think this will be really interesting and eye-opening for people who maybe haven't, though. I mean, and this is really interesting to think that the official narrative of Building 7 then is office fires, that it was sort of collateral damage caught in some of the debris that was being thrown or thrust away from the Twin Towers, and that pieces of debris would have crashed through the windows and started a fire and brought a steel building to its knees. That's the official story.
That's the current official story. The official story actually changed over the years. Initially, they said it was the diesel fuel tanks that pumped fuel out of them, and the fuel ignited and it heated all the columns. Then the story changed to that it was probably the structural damage from the steel of the North Tower hitting Building 7. And then finally they settled on, no, it was just normal office fires that were ignited but when the debris from the North Tower hit the building. So the story's changed over the years. The story is, it's far-fetched in the extreme. The fires were pretty unremarkable in Building 7. They weren't very large, and it's a one in a million chance. It's never happened before. And then when you dig into the details of the story, at every single step of the way, the phenomena, the structural behavior that they describe, that they allege happened, couldn't actually happen. There's like a solid engineering or scientific reason why each step of the way their story doesn't make any sense. So yeah, it's far-fetched.
So let's talk about some of the evidence that you have here, some of the video clips. Can you walk me through what we're seeing here and explain on the screen what our audience can expect from this?
Yeah, so looking at the collapse of Building 7 first, there's two clips there. They just show it from two different angles. What you're seeing is the building is sitting there motionless, and then instantaneously goes into free fall. There's not even a transition, and this is some colleagues of mine and I just wrote a paper on this that's going to be published next week in the Journal of 9/11 Studies on our website. But the building just instantaneously goes into free fall, symmetrically into its footprint. It's in free fall for about 2.5 seconds or 100 feet. Imagine standing near a building that's 47 stories high, and it just suddenly goes into free fall like a bowling ball and just drops 100 feet. That's what you're looking.
Without any sort of rumbling from an earthquake or something, some sort of alert alarm that a jet hitting the building or anything, it just collapses. It just collapses.
It just collapses like a snap of a finger. Now they have this elaborate story about how one column on one side of the building buckled due to some local structural failures, and that set off this chain reaction. But if you and you do see that in the beginning of one of the clips that I showed you, you see the top penthouse in the building falling into the building about 8 seconds before the rest of the building suddenly goes into free fall. And the official story says that that's caused by this one column failing, which caused that penthouse to fall. And then you get this chain reaction of all the other columns starting to fail, first in the core and then in the exterior. But if you had all that happening, you would see a tremendous amount of deformation on the outside of the building. You would see all this stuff happening. And if you look at their computer models, it's a sort of a combobulated mess of columns failing. And if you look at the video, there's nothing happening. It's motionless. And then it goes into free fall. And if you had a chain reaction of structural failures, you'd see sort of one part of the building start to fall first, start to like cave in first, and then the other part, and then it would sort of like in a very uncontrolled, messy way might start to tilt or whatever. But the idea that just comes straight down is clear cut evidence that all the columns were removed at the same time. As to that upper penthouse, we believe, and I think the evidence, the observational evidence shows the columns that were below that penthouse must have been cut high up in the building for the penthouse to come down first, and then 7-8 seconds later, they took out the rest of the columns. So that penthouse coming down first was about sort of controlling the fall of the penthouse, that it didn't fall sort of outside of the building's footprint. If you look at the whole process, it's an incredibly clean process, and you're just not going to get that from a natural building collapse.
I want to get into the why in a minute, but I want to go through some more of these videos and some of this evidence here. So among the other clips that you provide here, can you walk me through what else we see?
Yeah, so I wanted to share with you a couple of clips of that just showing the foreknowledge that Building 7 was going to come down. There's actually many clips, and there's many types of evidence and documentation of people saying, oh, this building is going to come down. We know this building is going to come down. I sent you a couple clips. One was recorded by the CNN crew that was there, and they're walking backwards from the building, and somebody says, keep your eye on that building, it's going to come down soon. The CNN cameraman says, the building is about to blow up, move it back.
Keep your eye on that building, it's coming down.
Closer to the building, it was almost like nighttime. What was left of the building was a fiery hulk. The firefighters thought it might collapse. Pieces of the building kept falling. Rescue workers pushed people away from the scene.
Walking back, there's a building about to blow up. On flame, debris coming down.
In the other clip, you have a firefighter, David Restuccio, tell Brian Williams on MSNBC that they had reports all day that the building was damaged and that it might come down or would be taken down.
We are on the phone with New York Fire Department Lieutenant David Restuccio. Lieutenant, where are you right now?
I'm at the corner of Northmore Street and Greenwich Street.
Can you confirm it was number 7 that just went in?
Yes, sir.
And you guys knew this was coming all day?
We had heard reports that the building was unstable and that it eventually would either come down on its own or it would be taken down.
So that's just to indicate that there was chatter, there was discussion all day in the hours leading up to the collapse that that the building might be brought down. So this is not some like far-fetched idea, some a mystery. Like we have evidence that it was discussed and that it was people in the fire department were at least hearing that the building might be brought down. So in terms of the other folks saying this building is going to come down, like there's no way that like somebody is going to can be certain that a building is going to come down at a certain point in time, and then it actually does happen exactly the way that they're predicting.
Psalms 64:8. So that they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. Yahweh put a spirit on Esau to rat out Esau. This is Job 13:4. But ye are forgers of lies, you are all physicians of no value. These people get these degrees of knowledge, not 360 degrees of complete understanding that's found in the Bible, but they get degrees of knowledge, which they give letters to, like BA, a master's, a PhD, and they become doctors. But I read it again. But ye are forgers of lies, you're all physicians of no value. All right, so they lie. These things get written into the history book and taught to children. So the biggest question is to ask, if they can lie about something that happened practically yesterday, how easy is it for them to lie about something that happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, a millennia ago, 2,000 years ago? Everything that is centered around Esau, Edom, is a lie. Their entire existence, their power structure, is all based upon lies. This whole white, black, Arab, yellow, Chinese, Japanese, all these are false labels and titles and lies to hide the truth. All right? This is Job 15:5. For thy mouth uttereth thine iniquity, and thou choosest the tongue of the crafty. Thy own mouth condemneth thee, and not I. Yea, thy own lips testify against thee. Call halal Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai Ba'Shem Ba'Kakwadash Wa Abba Babal Kwam Yasharala Shalom.